Greetings, Earthlings! This is for entertainment purposes only. Don't take anything I say seriously. In fact, just don't break any laws. Obey your government. Be a slave to the machine. Be a little sheep, because that's what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, you don't exist and you don't fit into the New World Order. That being said, like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, most importantly, I do order blood work. I will read your blood work. I will treat you as a patient. I will also do your nutrition and your training programming and get you ready for competitions. I do everything. Everything anyone else does, I do it. I do it all. I'm like three people in one. You should click the link in the description box and sign up for a consult so we can get you started on the new you. Whether it be a healthier you or a champion, whatever you want to be, I will help you get there. Enjoy the show. You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit. Hello there, party people. Today we are here to talk about how dark this screen is. No, I'm kidding. Let's see if this helps. And it doesn't. All right. Well, I will work on my lighting conditions in the future. But today's episode of Mr. Rogers' Black Metal Neighborhood is teaching children to worship growth hormone. So let's see here. This is going to be a basic informal review of the nuts and bolts of growth hormone. This is not supposed to be a super complicated thing with growth hormone. One of the biggest concerns I have is, to me, using anabolics or HRT without using growth hormone is severely R word. That it'd be like running with one leg, and then people trying to buy super fancy sneakers for the one leg they're running on. To me, it's a complete travesty that anyone would ever think about using anything without using growth hormone with it. And so, because the vast majority of people have no clue about how important growth hormone is, that's what this video is for. This is not for someone who's been using growth hormone for years. Although you might find something useful to it, it is for the beginners who have no clue what they're doing. And if this is new information to you, you're a beginner. Okay, what is growth hormone? Growth hormone is a peptide hormone that's released by your pituitary. It comes in 6 different versions. It's basically there to liberate energy sources because it helps liberate fat from fat cells, and it stops using carbohydrates as a fuel source primarily. And the goal of it is to give you the energy for IGF-1's functions. Now, IGF-1 is a downstream effect of growth hormone. Growth hormone will go to the liver and IGF-1 is produced. This is usually, it needs estrogen to do this. And you will find that in the muscle, the same situation will occur. Growth hormone goes to the muscle, and IGF-1 is locally expressed in the muscle. Some people will call it MGF. Really, the exons and introns are the same for IGF-1 and MGF. It's just the expression of the exons is different for MGF than it is for IGF. And that some people believe that you should call MGF IGF-1C, I believe. I don't have that part memorized because no one goes with that convention, but there is like a splinter faction of scientists, some extremists, as every religion has its extreme faction, right? And then no one takes seriously. Well, there's an extreme faction of biochemists who think that MGF shouldn't exist and it should be called IGF-1, I believe C, whereas the other one should then be called IGF-1A. And I could have those letters interposed, or it could be the wrong letters, heaven forbid, because I'm not one of those nut jobs. I just am like, MGF, mechanical growth factor, is way easier to remember than insulin like growth factor 1. So what is GH? So GH, when people say GH, what they mean is synthetic GH that's used for the purpose. Well, I'll get to that when I get to the why, but for the what we're using the 22 kilodalton version of growth hormone that is 191 amino acids. This is the best one for growing muscle. There's a 192 version. It's not as good. I don't remember why it's not as good. You don't need to know why it's not as good because they ain't making it. And as far as the 20 kilodalton, the 6 kilodalton, the 16 kilodalton, and the two other kilodaltons, it doesn't really matter. It's like if Elon Musk had 5 brothers, do you give a fuck who they are? I don't. So we only need one, and that's the 191 22 kilodalton amino acid sequence growth hormone. Now, a lot of people will say, well, US pharmacies are better. All the guys I know who are on the internet saying that the US pharmacy GH is better are the ones selling it. And, I can prescribe growth hormone for 3 grand, or you can get it on the underground for like $200. So it's how much better is it? Like if you were to shoot a whole bottle, 10 units of GH, and then 3 hours later get your blood tested, and the blood test shows that you've got 30 GH level in your blood, that GH is pretty fucking good. Like maybe the shittiest GH out there is 26, and the best GH out there is 36. Let's say Serostim's 36. So 30 versus 36. So if you used 5 units and got 15, but you use Serostim's 5 units and got 18, why not just use 6 units of what your generic is to get 18? And it would be because Serostim's 20 grand a month, normal prescription GH is 3 grand a month, and then underground labs is like $200 a month or less, $80 a month, then why the fuck would you ever spend 20 grand when you could spend $80? It's half as good. Okay, so you spent $160. You get twice as much for $160 versus 20 grand. That do not be as stupid as the fucking Liver King. Do not spend 10 grand a month on fucking growth hormone because you're getting it from an HRT clinic or some doctor who's a schmuck. Just get the cheapest shit and it'll work if it's real GH. And the way you test that is you shoot the whole bottle, you go to get your blood drawn, and if it says that it's 30, it's good enough. If you need 11 units to hit 30, good enough. You're not going to use that much. That's going to be under a different section. So who should use GH? It's my personal opinion that every single man, woman, and child, well, every single man and woman over the age of 20 should be on growth hormone. That people are like, oh my God, he's crazy. You can't just make those blinking statements like that. It's like, here's the deal. It stops you from aging. So raise your hand if you want to age. Then don't use growth hormone. If you don't want to age, use growth hormone. People are like, but it causes cancer. It doesn't cause cancer. IGF-1 will amplify the speed that a pre-existing tumor grows. It doesn't mean you're going to get cancer. You get cancer from walking outside, breathing our air, drinking our water, eating our food. That's where you get cancer from. Sometimes I feel like I get cancer from listening to stupid people talk, but I'd rather be that. But one thing I know for sure is if it slows the aging process and it makes you healthier longer, I mean, just look at Sylvester Stallone when he's in his 60s. He looks better than most guys in their 30s. Look at Sylvester Stallone now. Go watch Tulsa King, and you tell me that's a 78-year-old man, and tell me how bad GH is for you. It's like, don't use it. Don't use it. It's like one of those things where it's like, how should I put this? What's the consequences if all the men go gay? All the women are available. That's the consequences. Does that hurt me? No, fuck. Dudes start fucking each other. Fuck each other all the time. Fuck every dude you can see. I'll just clean up, right? That's the same thing with growth hormone. Don't use growth hormone. I'll just collect all the trophies. That one, that one, that one, that one. I'll collect all of them. I'll win every show. Don't use growth hormone. But if you want to compete, if you want to beat somebody, then use growth hormone. As far as, the same thing is like if you want to die, if you want to get sick and die, if you want to get old, don't use growth hormone. If you want to live, if you want to age slowly, if you don't want to age gracefully, if you want to age kicking and screaming and you want to look as young as you fucking can, then use growth hormone. If you're afraid to use growth hormone, there's always the secretagogues, which are more money and are less effective as everything. That's not the real thing. Or you could use MK677. So Oh, that's who should use it. Now, people are like, there's got to be more exceptions. There probably is. And I could probably do a 65-minute video that's boring as shit, explaining every fucking circumstance in which you wouldn't want to use GH. But this is a broad, sweeping strokes, common sense approach to reality that hypochondriacs, computer programmers, and people with anxiety disorders probably shouldn't watch. This is how I live my life. I just look at the bottom line and I go for it, and it works almost every time. Why do you use GH? You use GH because you don't want to age. You use GH because you want to stay healthy. Use GH because it converts T4 into T3, so you lose fat faster that way. Use GH because it burns fat directly. Use GH because it preserves the carbohydrates in your muscle cell so you can stay full and you don't lose muscle through that mechanism. You use GH because it converts into local IGF-1, which could be MGF, that will cause a satellite cell to donate a nucleus, and the nucleus will then cause the cell from it, instead of hypertrophy where it grows, into hyperplasia where it splits into two cells, and then they can grow, basically allowing you to have infinite amount of muscle growth. Fuck that, right? Why would you want that? You so that the GH increases androgen receptors so that your testosterone and other anabolic steroids work more effectively. Likewise, anabolic steroids increase the GH receptors, which means the GH works more effectively. So that's why I'm saying it's like running on one leg to use just testosterone. You want to run on both legs because the GH makes the test work better, the test makes the GH work better. And the test creates estrogen, and the estrogen makes the GH convert to IGF-1 more. And the IGF-1 causes satellite cells to migrate to the cell so that testosterone can grow the cell until it splits into two cells and grow more cells. And then those cells will have their own GH receptors. Those cells will produce their own MGF, blah, 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 blah. It's just synergistic. It's fucking our word not to use GH if you're trying to grow. That's the lot of reasons for the why. If you need more reasons why, I'll probably do an advanced why video for people who are avoidant when they've got the personality disorder of neuroses, and they basically can't pull the trigger no matter how much evidence is put in their face. Indecision. I consider indecision to be a giant sin. It's just like pull the trigger even if you have to shoot from the hip. People are like, that's not how doctors are supposed to be. It's like, you're right. I live in the real world. I don't look at things as what could possibly go wrong, and let's not do a goddamn thing ever because there's the possibility. I'm not going to go outside because a plane could fall on my head. I'm not going to go outside because lightning could strike me. It doesn't make any sense, especially when those people play the lotto. All right, so how do you use GH? So you probably didn't watch or didn't pay attention to my video about why insulin syringes are so much better than hypodermic syringes. And if you did watch it, it seems that everyone fucking misunderstood it. What I was saying was if you use an insulin syringe, you inject every day because you're injecting your GH every day anyway, and that people think insulin syringe has to be subcutaneous. It doesn't have to be subcutaneous. You just go, if you can see veins, you can go on the side of the vein and you're going to go right into the muscle. There's no fat there if you can see veins. So, I mean, people are like, oh my God, don't suggest such a thing. But I personally have no problem shooting in my neck if I wanted to. I just don't want to grow my neck. So, because of the localized effects, you would pick a body part you want to grow and you would inject that body part. And in theory, it should grow. There was a study done in 2005 by Frost that shows that if you injected muscle in petri dishes, basically, it's outside the body, muscle tissue would grow. And that if it basically required the equivalent in a 200-pound man of 2 units, and it's ambiguous as to whether it would grow with less. It's ambiguous if it would grow with more, you know. And then with his math, is he accounting for bodybuilder, 200-pound bodybuilder, 200-pound fatty? Because it's not the same thing. A 200-pound fatty might have 30 pounds of muscle tissue, whereas a 200-pound bodybuilder might have 100 pounds of muscle tissue. A 200-pound bodybuilder might be a lean body mass of 180 pounds, where a 200-pound fatty might have a lean body mass of 140 pounds. So it's not the same thing. So it's kind of ambiguous. So the how and the when kind of interconnect. So the best time to inject growth hormone is before bed. Your body is most likely to receive it well at that time. That is for bioavailability, if you will. Intramuscular is going to be more bioavailable than subcutaneous. Now, there's some studies that show that the area under the curve is better subcutaneous, but that would be great for fat loss. But how are you going to grow the muscle you inject if you don't inject a muscle at all? So, if your goal is to grow muscle, you would inject in the muscle. At night, they saw that instead of getting 7.5 out of 2 units, you get about 13. Plus, when you hit deep sleep, which in the test subjects was 2 a.m. I don't know if this is ubiquitous for all humans or if it's based on a 11 p.m. bedtime. It was 2 a.m. And if you have a 2 a.m. bedtime, it might be 5 a.m. for you. I don't know. But approximately 2 a.m. in this study, people released more IGF-BP3. That's IGF binding protein 3. The IGF binding protein 3 is a carrier that extends the half-life of the IGF and makes it more efficient. So if the purpose is to grow, then the purpose is to get the most IGF out of your GH you can, which would mean you would inject it when you would get the best bioavailability before bed so that it peaks approximately 2 hours later when you've got this surge of binding protein 3, and then that will have the best yield. So doing 5 units in the morning will not get the same amount of muscle growth as 5 units before bed. Now, there's an argument that if you do it first thing in the morning before fasted cardio, you will burn more fat if you're in a calorie deficit. This may be true. However, if it's got a 4-hour half-life, shooting and the maximum benefit you can get is from 1.5 units, then if you were to shoot it at midnight and you shot 6 units at midnight, it would be the equivalent of 3 units at 4 a.m. It would be the equivalent of 1.5 units at 8 a.m. So if you were going to shoot 1.5 at 8 a.m. or shoot 8 before bed or 6 before bed, it's the same 1.5 at 8 a.m. either way. So this is another argument for why Serostim and other manufacturers of growth hormone suggest doing the whole dose right before bed. Now, there's a theory that Roman Fritz basically pointed this out to me. People aren't sophisticated enough, patient enough, or willing to inject multiple times a day. It's going to be hard to get them to inject every day. So that's why, and then doing math is extremely painful for a lot of people, and it's getting worse. Thanks to calculators, people suck ass at math. So Serostim, and they make more money this way, just said inject the whole bottle right before bed, which is 18 units. And Serostim is the gold standard. That's why it's 20 grand a month, is because you're shooting a whole fucking bottle before bed every night. And rather than saying, if this is too much, cramping in your hands, then do instead of doing half a bottle every day, they said just do one whole bottle every other day. Like, that's how fucking lazy they expect people to be. But because people actually believe these people give a fuck what they're doing, they assume that means it's better to inject the whole thing every other day. When they don't realize, no. They just assume you're so fucking stupid, you can't draw the needle up halfway all the way and then plunge back 50%. That they assume that you're so goddamn dumb you can't divide by 2. And so rather than having you do a half a bottle every day, they have you do the whole bottle and then skip a day. This is the proof to me that that is not the best dosing protocol. However, that is a dosing protocol endorsed by Alex Kikell in his book, the Somatotrophic Bible, basically the growth hormone Bible. He uses a fancy word for growth hormone Bible. And let me see, I've got the title right here, Somatotropic Bible. So the point is, that's one procedure, and that's a popular procedure endorsed by the makers of Serostim, is to shoot the whole load before bed. Now, I'm not saying Alex says do 18 units. I'm just saying that he says for maximum growth, 18 before bed, because that's when you get the best efficiency, and that's when you're going to have the most IGF-1. Now, I want to point something out that based on J3 University, and if you would decide to sign up for J3 University, the best online coaching service in the world, use code Todd5 for savings and to support this channel, that there is a benefit, in fact, possible superiority to breaking that dose up multiple times throughout the day. And that if you dose the 2 units that we talked about earlier for localized growth, and you do 2 units multiple times a day, you will get more muscle growth than if you do it all before bed. Now, the study was not on bodybuilders. It was not on bodybuilders on steroids. It was not on bodybuilders on insulin. It was not on people with a lot of muscle. It was not on people who had mature muscle. It was not on anything like our sample size or the population that we're talking about. This was just on cultured muscle tissue. But in theory, if you were to shoot every 5 hours, 2 units, it would be more beneficial, even though you're only going to get 8 units a day, because there's only so many hours in the day. If you shot every 5 hours, 2 units, or every 4 hours, 2 units, making sure to have carbs in between each shot because the insulin resensitizes the GH receptor, you would get more localized IGF-1 production than you would get out of the systemic IGF-1. And then the systemic IGF-1 impedes the local IGF-1. So if you're not trying to go up a weight class, if you're just trying to grow delts, and that's the only muscle you need, you could shoot each delt with 1 unit every 4 hours. And in theory, your delts would grow and the rest of your body wouldn't. Whereas if somebody isn't a pro bodybuilder and didn't need one body part and all the rest has to stay the same, otherwise they go out over 212 or over their classic cap, or they're an open bodybuilder, or they're just not a bodybuilder at all, they just want to get bigger everywhere, then it would make sense systemic would. Now, the big flaw with systemic that people are concerned with is that the spleen grows faster than the intestines, and the intestines grow faster than the heart, and that you get organ growth, in other words, and that muscles are not the top priority for systemic IGF-1. Although the theory that a big abdomen was due to organ growth is no longer prevalent. It's been proven that with proper vacuums and ab training, which takes years to correct a large abdomen, and having good digestion and good GI health, you will not have a big waist, and that intestinal growth isn't really the contributing factor to these issues. But this is why this is such a confusing subject is there's two different schools of thought. There's the J3U method, which is 2 units every so often, every 4 to 5 hours, and that's going to get you the best look without using as much GH. Or then there's the Serostim manufacturer's approach is just shoot a fuck ton before bed, and then they laugh all their way to the bank. And a lot of the pro bodybuilders do that. They do shoot 10 units or 20 units a day, and then the splitting the difference, like the Rich Piana method was using 2 units every 2 hours, but shooting insulin in between every shot. So he was still getting in 15 to 20 units a day, but he was still using the localized idea of it. Which, so these are things to compare. Like from what I've noticed is if I was using 2 units before fasted cardio, 2 units post training when I'm very receptive to it, and you are too, and then 2 units before bed, I saw an improvement when I increased to 4 units before bed. I saw an improvement when I increased to 6 units before bed. I saw an improvement when I increased to 8 units before bed. Now, is it better to do it that way than to do 3, 3, and 6 to go 2, 2, and 8? Or is it better to go 4, 4, and 4 to get 12? That I don't know. But it would make sense that the most based on my body weight and a low body fat percentage relative to the general population, it would make little sense to go over 3 units, 3 units, and then the rest. But if you're most receptive before bed, that makes sense to want to do it. In theory, I could plug in a fourth dose and go 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 7.5, and hit 15. And then there's the side effects part. Why not to do it? Why not to do it in this sense of the word? Why not to do it? So the reason why you wouldn't do it is most of the time people hit a brick wall in three regards. One, their blood glucose fasted is too high. Typically, what people would do is institute metformin pre-contest or berberine in the off season to help mitigate this effect. Also, going for 10-minute walks after every meal really helps with this. It sounds like witchcraft. It fucking works. It really does. If you're in the off season, you want to speed up your digestion and mobilize the nutrients and get them to the muscle anyway. So either posing or doing a 10-minute walk after every meal is going to help. It doesn't sound like it should. It is fucking dramatic. And the studies show it's more effective than any medication, metformin or otherwise. The other approach is to use Lantus. Now, Lantus, it has a very minimal effect on the IGF-1 receptor as well as the insulin receptor. So that's why Lantus is so popular, because it's also all the time. And then since IGF-1 lasts for 48 hours, your IGF-1 levels, if you're shooting a lot of GH, is 300 to 600 level. If you're shooting Lantus in the morning, it also, because it processes the carbohydrates faster, it actually makes you hungrier. So you could use the walks and Lantus, and that's a very standard protocol, is for someone to be on anabolics, GH, and Lantus with berberine and walking. And that should mitigate any insulin resistance. And so you're using diabetes meds to treat artifactual diabetes. You don't actually have diabetes, but type 2 diabetes is reversible anyway. You've got a type 2 diabetes secondary to using too much GH. How much is too much GH? Anything over 3 units of GH could make someone resistant. But the HRT level for GH for men is 2 units. The HRT unit amount for women is 1 unit. So that means if you're just HRT, you're only going to be using like 20 milligrams or 30 milligrams of test and 2 units of GH before bed anyway. So that's why you could use the same insulin syringe and inject the muscle you want to bring up the most. If you're a woman, you'd be using 0.5 milligrams of testosterone and 1 unit of GH before bed, and you pick the muscle you want to grow the most. Simple. As far as that's pretty much everything you need to know. Oh, the cramping hands. The reason why the US pharmacies, people think they're better, is because they look leaner. The reason why they look leaner is because they've laced them with diuretics. And that's because the only real side effect of GH at normal doses is water retention. And the list is super long, like difficulty breathing, painful cramping, carpal tunnel, edema in the ankles. That's all one thing. They just write it out in a confusing way because it's the way the patients perceive it. It's not the way it is. What way it is you're retaining more sodium at the kidney, so you have water retention. If you're already taking telmisartan, which you probably should be if you're using anabolics, the telmisartan will fix this angiotensin-renin system issue of the GH. And if it isn't enough, you could always take some Aquazide, which is hydrochlorothiazide, like 6.25 milligrams a day, and that would flush it. People are like, well, if they put mannitol in all the prescription GHs, let's get some mannitol. Now, you don't need mannitol. That's just the one diuretic they use. It isn't necessarily the best diuretic they use, because the hydrochlorothiazide would help you with your blood pressure issues as well from the water retention. So that's why I think the telmisartan plus the hydrochlorothiazide combo meal might be more appropriate for our population than using the mannitol as a powder form added to the GH, because you're using underground or Chinese GH. That's pretty much it. Other than water retention symptoms or insulin resistance, there really is no side effects to GH except for the potential of the IGF-1 to cause cancer to grow faster. But testosterone is going to upregulate IGF-1 production as well, and so is lifting weights. So if you're worried about getting cancer, then you shouldn't be lifting weights. You're using anabolics. Either you shouldn't be eating protein, shouldn't be eating carbs, if you shouldn't be breathing the air, and you shouldn't be drinking the water. That's pretty much it. Healthy immune system produces natural killer cells. Natural killer cells kills off cancer before it grows in the first place. So that's the long and the short of it. I have covered when to use your GH. It's either all before bed if you want to gain muscle, all before fasted cardio if you want to burn fat, or if you're using a lot of it, then you could break it up into shots that are 2 units at a time, 5 hours apart. And then for the most part, everyone would be getting in 8 units or less a day. Very few people can handle more than 8 units. If you can handle more than 8 units, the logic is to dump it before bed. Or if you're over 200 pounds, you would scale that up with your weight. Maybe it's 2.5 in every shot. Maybe it's 3 in every shot. And you would, where to shoot it? You shoot it in the muscles with an insulin syringe. And likely you're going to be putting your other ingredients in there, like your L-carnitine or your melanotan or your testosterone or your masteron or your primo. Why do you use GH? Because you have a brain. Who should use GH? People who have a brain. And what is GH? It's the shit that you're not using that you should be. If any of this was confusing, rewatch it. I'm going to rewatch it and add timestamps eventually, but I'm not going to pay someone right now to put timestamps in. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. If one of you guys wants to be my best friend, you could put in the timestamps for me. I would totally appreciate that. I mean, it really doesn't have to be that complicated. One timestamp would be what is GH, one is who, one is why, one is how, one is when, and then one timestamp could be summary, which I just did. All right, remember, if you want help, click the link in the description box and set up for a consult. I can coach you. I could be your doctor. That if you want $3,000 worth of GH, I could prescribe that. Or you could do other things. But the point is, there's the MK677 route. There's a plethora of routes, but one way or the other, I can order your blood work, see what your IGF-1 levels are. If your IGF-1 levels aren't high enough for you to achieve your goals or stay healthy, then we can treat that. All right. May the force be with you. Toodles. You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit.